All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Coffee for Closers, special edition here. I'm here in studio with Mr. Rick Kallmeyer. We're talking all about the new Prohibited Transaction Exemption 2020-02, basically improving investment advice for advisors or for workers and retirees, and again, might be putting some of our advisors in a bit of a pinch. Everybody seems to be up in arms about this. Rick, thanks for joining us today. Talk a little bit about this. We'll just kind of gloss over. There's still a lot. Let me make absolutely sure with everybody out there. There's still a lot to be said about the particulars on this subject. However, we did want to, we sent an email out recently about the proposed, or actually it's actually enforced now, the PTE 2020-02. But again, we just wanted to elaborate on it just a tiny bit so that folks out there could hear it on the show, that like to watch the show, just hear us kind of have an educated conversation about it, maybe decipher a bit of this for those watching. So, Rick, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, Al. Always is.
So, obviously a new rule for a lot of us. It was one of those things that kind of snuck in there at the 11th hour, kind of surprised a lot of people. February 16th went into play. Everybody kind of scrambled to figure out what the heck this means, and then realized that there's basically an exemption. Let me make sure I'm seeing it right. But basically, okay.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things that everybody, I think, thought was going to be scrapped from new administration to old, and it was one of those things that kind of just, I guess, slid under the radar, if you will, and made its through. I'm sure a ton of people have heard that already, but, kind of say caught everyone off guard, but one of those old demons that kind of pop back up from the old vice.
Right. So it was Trump instituted this. He put it together.
Yeah.
The Trump administration did, I guess. But Biden kind of surprisingly decided to keep with it and just put it into play. Didn't try and unwind it or do anything different. It sounds like it could be, it sounds like it's less damning, we'll call it, than the first Department of Labor fiduciary rule that was coming out, right?
Yeah.
But it does seem like there will be some gray area and some confusion until we're very, very much clear. And enough legal teams have taken a look at it before we're really clear on what this 5-part test is. And we'll talk a little bit about what this means for advisors. But it sounds like the exemption includes an extension of the DOL's non-enforcement policy to the end of this year, 2021. So we're not going to see this really enforced until then. But
December 20th is the drop dead date.
December 20th, 2021. So we're going to basically just try and make sure we're doing everything we can to get prepped for that, kind of covering any, potential audits that might come down the road or whatever. Yeah. So a lot of groups out there are advising to do this form. It's the 8424 form.
Essentially the 8424, and I think there's still a lot of things that the jury's out on. So, as it was in 2016, a lot of things are probably going to change. New amendments. Who's going to take responsibility for this? Who's going to be heading up where the documents are coming from? What kind of documents? So all those things are still out based on how the insurance carrier or FMO or IMO are going to handle the whole situation. But yeah, it's essentially the 8424 with some minor adjustments.
Right. So listen to this. This is from American Equity. Rick, you sent this to me, but I love reading this. It says, this new interpretation of the 5-part test makes it likely that the sales agents are acting in a fiduciary capacity when selling qualified annuities, IRAs. Agents who are fiduciaries in the sales transaction cannot be compensated on that sale without first complying with a prohibited transaction exemption the new PTE 2020 requires. Part A. That and Will, could you bring this up on the screen? Actually, let me just share this with everybody so you all.
And a lot of that 5-part test did come from the kind of securities world, and now we're dealing with a lot of the overflow from it, and how that obviously corresponds to us in qualified transactions.
Sure. Okay. All right. So it says right here, this is what I'm looking at right here. So this new interpretation, 5-part test, makes it likely that sales agents are acting in a fiduciary capacity, which means basically what we were reading is essentially if a client doesn't come to you and say, hey, here's $200,000 of my IRA that I'm withdrawing. Like they're already made the decision to, the 401k, sorry. They've already decided that they're withdrawing the money from their 401k. And then they're looking at it. If you come to an insurance agent and say, hey, you know, what should I do with this $200,000 that I'm withdrawing? Then they're not bound by it, right? Like they're not giving investment advice at that point because they're not advising on a 401k.
At what point do you become a fiduciary and when do you start meddling with your qualified accounts, right? Like if somebody has a 401k and you're saying this may not be the best for you because of your age or because of other reasons, like you're still giving some part of advice on a securities license project on a Title I, asset. So to be able to give that advice and to be talking about that advice, you technically should and have to be a fiduciary on that. Now, again, I think that's a big difference between the BICE in 2016 and now is back then they were like, we want everyone to be 65 licensed. We want to move these funds out of the insurance world and move it directly into the securities world. We want ERISA and SEC to control over it and watch over it. And now they're more saying, all right, that's a little gung-ho, a little ridiculous. So why don't we just adjust it and say, if you're not, to the SEC a fiduciary, how do we fill out these requirements to prove you're acting in a fiduciary standpoint?
Right. So it says the agent acknowledges that, I'm sorry, let me make sure I grab this the right part. The agent acknowledges, this is the two parts, right? The agent acknowledges in writing that he/she is a fiduciary to the customer and, part B, an insurance company perform an annual comprehensive review of the agent compensation conflicts of interest and sales practices. So it's basically saying, you're saying that you're going to act in the best interest of this client. So this is exempting you from doing a prohibited transaction, right?
Yep.
So it's saying, okay, yeah, you can do this, you can sell this to this person, but you have to be in writing, saying that you're doing the right thing for the client. So if it feels like it's not, liabilities on you, right?
And of course, just like originally, that's going to include things like what you're getting paid. If there's any outside, influencing factors, trips, those kind of things, you may or may not have to disclose those yet.
We're waiting on that. Yeah.
How the insurance companies are going to handle that, whether they're going to keep them or what they're going to do with those things. And as well, probably all other additional fees. You're basically probably going to have to do, and that's what they're looking at, is doing an additional product disclosure and like a raw degree, saying, hey, look, this is what the product does. This is why I'm advising it. This is how much I'm getting paid. And that should be the sum of the 8424. I think American Equity is already in from their email.
We were doing that. It was the 8424. It's like, and that's kind of what we sent out in the email to everybody, was like saying, hey, look, here's a cover your behind solution just in the interim. Like, we're waiting on more particular forms to come from our carrier partners, but here's something that was done a while back, this 8424 form that's going to have you disclose what your commission is to the client, and basically just kind of let them know all the standard things that you would be letting somebody know if you were a fiduciary. Like, here's what my fee is. Here's what this product does. I did some proper comparisons. I've deemed that this is in the best interest of your situation, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And so it does seem like just a tiny bit watered down version, but it does sound like it was like the first DOL was so, I'm killing the insurance advisor, right? There's no reason that an insurance agent should ever be talking to a retiree. And insurance agents are like, do we need to exist? And need to exist? And yeah, of course you need to exist. Well, the only real asset that people would be using these days to fund an annuity would be their 401k, which is like, we did away with pensions. People need to sell these annuities. Are you telling me that the only people that can buy these annuities are like
people that have $100,000 cash?
Right.
Yeah.
But okay, so they're saying, okay, every insurance agent that wants to advise on that needs to be securities licensed. Okay, maybe. Maybe that's the path they want to go down, but I don't know. Is that the right thing? We don't know yet. Right? Is that the only way you can act in somebody's best interest? Are you saying every insurance agent out there is not acting in the best interest? Right?
And has to go get licensed with a whole world of products that they don't believe is necessarily right for the client situation. You tell me now I got to go learn everything about ETFs, mutual funds, and the whole rest of the securities world just to advise you on retirement distribution.
It's like, why you might as well make the asset just not even, there shouldn't be an insurance test to learn. Like, you should be able to get an agency or an agent license to sell annuities then, You'd just lump it in with the securities training at that point.
26 license or something smaller to that degree rather than the whole 65 or 7.
Right. Like, you get some licensing that says, you're going to be a fiduciary. You're going to advise on all these mutual funds, all these variable products. And we're lumping in fixed index annuities and fixed annuity, or maybe it's just fixed annuities. That's the only thing they want insurance agents to sell. I don't know, but it's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
All right. So they come back after, the appeals court reversed the decision and kind of put it on like a back burner for a while, kick the can down the road. Right. Yep. And then they come back with this DOL 2.0 that's like, okay, well, here's kind of a middle ground. And you were telling me earlier that the NAIC kind of helped try to progress things forward while that can was kicked down the road. The NAIC started putting in rules and regulations for advisors to start putting their best interests or making sure they had done their research prior to. That stuff seemed to pave the way for the SEC or the Department of Labor, rather, to kind of realizing that there's a middle ground here that we can figure out to where we can make sure that these insurance agents are acting in the best interest of the client, but can also give some advice on to somebody that's looking to retire. But rarely is there a client that's like just coming and saying, hey, I'm making this withdrawal.
Yeah, and you're just my facilitator.
And I know what I want, and I want an annuity, like what, and you come to an insurance agent. That's not the real world.
And again, even in that facet, right, how could you act in a fiduciary manner? A client comes to you and says, I have $150,000 in a 401k. I want to move it to this product. Like, you can't be a fiduciary at that same point and just say yes to that.
Right.
Like, you don't know the rest of their situation. You don't know what's going on with it. You put them in a 10-year product and they have a husband or a wife that, needs liquidity or something that you don't know because they're not in the office. Like, it's a catch-22 on it. But you've seen the NAIC, I think, kind of push down this path. And me and my, I guess, kind of opinions on like regulation and more work that an advisor has to do just to do his job. Obviously not a fan of it. But you've seen them come in a lot of states and start adding like the 8-hour CE courses or the 8-hour fiduciary courses to a lot of different state licensing. And I think that was maybe not preemptive to this, but alongside it of saying, hey, look, our guys don't need to be 65 licensed. They don't need to go through all that. If we do more training and we do more requirements to write the products, and again, in a facet of have them disclose and discuss maybe a little bit more with the client of saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and this is a facet of I'm doing it, and also this is how much I'm making. And so there are no other outside incentives that are pushing me to make this decision for you. I'm doing what's best interest of you. We can get around having to make them, it's the option, right? You either go through more training on your side, have a document that says what you're doing, or you go get 65 license.
They just want the liability to fall on the advisor if something's not been executed in the client's best interest, right? Like, and it wasn't that way for the longest time. So there are ways to find that without making people take, it's like overkill, right? It's like dropping nukes when you could, here's the nuclear option. We're going to that option that'll just absolutely take care of the target, right? But
instead of let's talk about it,
or we could use this, machine gun or something like that, right? Like to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah.
But anyway, it is interesting to me that we're back down this path and that it wasn't as widely talked about as the DOL 1.0 was. This DOL 2.0, as we could call it, the PTE 2020-02, coming out and kind of sneaking in there is shocking to me. But again, it doesn't surprise me. They just wanted it to be in law. Now it's in law. And now it's just a matter of figuring out the particulars of the 5-part test, which it does sound like this 5-part test, as far as I'm looking at it, is going to be, pretty particular on, what it means to be a fiduciary.
Moving qualified funds and what qualifies you as a fiduciary.
Basically, if you're touching qualified funds, you're going to be a fiduciary,
Yeah. So what's interesting, I don't know if they're going to do this, and I would like to see this as well. I don't know if the insurance carriers are going to require the 8424 document when it comes to non-qualified annuities. I don't know if you pull an app packet and it'll have like an 8424 disclosure on it.
Depends, right? Right. If it's like in a bank CD or in somebody's checking account or something like that, probably not. But if it's like in a mutual fund, you're dumping some extra cash in some REITs or something like that, or
it'd be interesting to see if they just kind of blanket it across the board, or if this is like hey, look, only unqualified situations you need this document. It
does seem like that's what this law is about. Like when I look at we'll bring this up on the screen real quick for us. When I bring up this, this is from federalregister.gov. The federalregister.gov. This is a prohibited transaction exemption 2020, improving investment advice for workers and retirees. This is like targeting after the 401k.
Oh, yeah, this whole thing is all about 401ks. I read most of this document.
But this is the rule they're talking about. I mean, it's like, so I don't think that it'll touch like their non-qualified funds. I think that's maybe a reach for them right now.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting, and this is just the letter from American Equity, so all our American Equity partners out there, thanks for putting this out. It was a nice little layman's term breakdown for us all. They're saying in the meantime that advisors, because the new guidance and exemption includes, here, we'll read this section right here. The new guidance and exemption includes an extension of the DOL's non-enforcement policy until the end of 2021. Under this non-enforcement policy, in order to avoid enforcement action and penalties from the DOL, agents must act consistent with an impartial conduct standard defined by the DOL. This requires agents to make a good faith determination of whether they are a fiduciary, and if so, to act in the best interest of the consumer. Pretty simple stuff. Make a good faith gesture. I mean, are you giving them advice on how to move this 401k asset or this retirement asset, that those employer sponsored, retirement asset, to a IRA? And is that IRA an annuity, and are you securities licensed? I mean, if you're giving advice on to do that, then likelihood is you're committing a fiduciary act.
So, which means you have to explain why you're doing it, the purpose for it, all the good reasons for it, and everything you need to.
You can take that down well, thanks.
So,
interesting stuff. I don't think it's going to be a deterrent for clients to want to work with insurance-only agents, and this is much better than the former option, which was basically bye-bye insurance-only agent, or you better have a BD that's willing to sign off and take on liability, which was kind of the headache, the frustration of a lot of IMO distribution partners is like, hey, look, doing away with the IMO, especially a megastar for our advisors, it's like, okay, you'd be eliminating the marketing arm of financial advisors, securities and insurance only together.
And that was a big part of actually that document. If you read a lot of the document, that was a big argument a lot of people made against this, was like, hey, look, if you put, and again, I forgot the whole broker-dealer situation, that you had to have a broker-dealer attached and sign off on things, almost like a signature guarantee to even move money.
Yeah.
But that was a big argument, was like, hey, if you enforce this, like, yes, there may be some bad things that are happening with clients. There are bad advisors out there, but if you enforce this policy, you're going to be removing all of the good advisors that are out there doing good things for the clients, because they're not going to be able to get a hold of them or give advice.
Right.
Which means you're going to have a lot of people with 401ks that don't know what they're doing with them, no availability to it, which means you got a lot of retirees when they hit 60, 65, we hit a market dip, and now you have a lot of people that can't retire anymore, which obviously damages the U.S. economy. That was a big argument that a lot of people made, of like, you're chopping the legs out from a lot of free advisors.
BDs and RIAs, with maybe the exception of a handful, don't do anything to help advisors get in front of new prospects. Yeah. That's another channel, right? It's like they're not doing it. They help with compliance and regulatory issues, and they do fund management and all that stuff, but they don't do the marketing stuff on top of it. And what you'll end up doing is increasing the costs, right? Because they have to start doing those sort of things, and then you're going to increase the cost of proper financial management.
Yep, your independent channel is screwed.
You're passing those costs on to who? It's not the advisor that's going to eat that.
Yep.
It's not fair to the advisor to have to do that. They're already working on small spreads. So then you're talking about, and the RIA is not going to eat it, because the RIA or the BDs living on smaller spreads.
Yep.
So the consumer eats it, and you just priced a ton of middle America out of the investment advice.
That was another whole argument they had, was, if you, like, who is going to be in charge of this compliance, especially in the insurance world, right? Like, the SEC and ERISA are there, so they're going to watch over the fee-based advisors, but on the independent channel, like, who is going to do that? Is a carrier going to do that? Is the FMO going to do it? Or are you going to do a third party that's going to take over those things? And regardless of whoever does it, that means entire new compliance wings in each one of those facilities, which, like you're saying, now, you got to pay, either X commission to the advisor, like you have to gut somebody somewhere, and typically it's going to come from the client, unfortunately,
Right.
So.
Well, it's certainly an interesting topic. Nothing to worry about just yet. And as things continue to come, obviously, we'll be here to help you all better understand the situation as the news story unfolds. Interesting stuff. Definitely better than DOL's original go at this. Found some middle ground. We're moving in that direction. Will it have some humps in the way? For sure. But in the meantime, this 8424 form, if you haven't and you're watching this and you didn't get the email, which most of you should have, or maybe you don't want to go searching through your inbox again, you're going to reach out to us over here at Megastar, your internal team here. We'll be happy to get you that form. And yeah, best of luck to everybody out there. We'll keep you informed right here. Rick, thanks again for joining us, kind of talking us through a little bit of this. Yeah, we'll see you right here next time on Coffee for Closers. Thanks again.